Hey there. So around the end of August here in 2023, Bigme released two things. They released a firmware update for their devices that have Kaleido 3, and then they sent off an email touting this change, and in particular, how they've impacted ghosting. So this video is really about looking at that change. We'll focus on the Bigme Inknote Plus, and we'll see to what degree they made a difference in that regard. Just to putting all this in context, Kaleido 3, I would argue, has three major areas that are considered weaknesses. And for some people, they're deal breakers, and others, they're okay, but they're limitations, regardless of where you stand. So the first is around pixel density. Right now, Kaleido 3 has the best pixel density in color of any of the previous Kaleido techs, but it's still 150 ppi. So that's half of the black and white, which is at 300 ppi. So a lot of color tends to, in some cases, to look grainy as a result. And that's a limitation of the screen. And there's little that can be done about that until a future technology comes around. The second issue is around the dark background. And again, that's inherent in the technology. The bubbles, the e-ink bubbles, are black and white, and it's a layer on top of that which regulates the color, and that invariably is why the background is so dark. So there's nothing you can do from a software perspective around that. Now, there actually is something you can do to mitigate that, which is the front lighting. You can actually set front lighting to make the background look lighter, and in some cases, if you get the balance right, it can even look pretty close to white. But that's the problem, because using front lighting is a notable battery drain versus, say, a Carta screen where you wouldn't need front lighting nearly as often because of the lightness of that background. So those are two areas, the pixel density and then the darkened screen, are limitations that are just inherent in Kaleido 3, and they won't be solved until future iterations of the technology or a different color technology comes down the line. But ghosting is the third issue, and it is solvable. And we know this because we saw that with Boox when they released the Nova 3 color. That was their first Kaleido Plus device, I believe, in the 8-inch or 7.8-inch form factor. And when that device first came out, everyone hated the ghosting in that device. It may be my memory, it might be a bit skewed, but I tend to remember that being by far the biggest issue people had with that particular device. And at the time, people thought that too, like the other areas of Kaleido 3 that I mentioned, or Kaleido rather, couldn't be solved, that it was inherent in the technology. But Boox proved them wrong. Over a series of firmware updates, the ghosting improved dramatically. And I wish I had taken video of that. It's been a few years since that was the case. But clearly, ghosting went from being a crippling element to still being there, but much more acceptable. And so we know that this can happen. Now, when Boox released Kaleido 3 on their devices like the Tab Ultra C or the Tab Mini C, Boox dealt with ghosting in a very different way. They dealt with it by adding a graphics processor that theoretically is driving the display and giving a little more processing oomph to get rid of some of that ghosting, coupled with their operating system. So that's how they decided to tackle that in this new technology. Bigme, in releasing devices like the Inknote Color Plus or the Inknote Color Lite, doesn't have that graphical chip, and they have to try to resolve the inherent ghosting with Kaleido 3 in a different way, and they're going to have to do it the way that Boox did it back in the Nova 3 color. And so that's what this announcement from Bigme is really about. And it's interesting that they've made such a big deal out of it, which implies that they have had some successful inroads in their software attempt to address that issue. So this video is going to be looking at that and seeing if that's the case or not. To do that, we'll do a comparison. I'm going to compare the Tab Ultra C versus the latest firmware update of the Bigme Inknote Color Plus. This really isn't meant to be a comparison of the two devices. You know, as many of you know, I did a 3-part series comparing the two devices, albeit with previous firmware for the Bigme device. And I don't feel the need to retread that territory with this particular update. I'm just using the Boox device as a control. I think it's fair to say that for Kaleido 3, the Boox Tab Ultra in the 10 Ultra C in the 10-inch space is the gold standard right now for dealing with ghosting as it relates to that Kaleido 3 technology. So I'm going to use that to compare it to the Bigme to see how close they can come to the standard. So that's the purpose of the comparison, but not to compare the two devices in totality, just the ghosting aspect of it. Okay, I hope that helps. We're going to do 3 demonstrations. We're going to look at note-taking, which generally doesn't have ghosting, but you can get a little bit of it, so we'll just take a look at that. We're going to take a look at Google News. That's something where you scroll the screen, so a lot of potential for ghosting there. And we'll look at comic books because a lot of comic books tend to be darker, so you can see the ghosting much more in black or darker backgrounds. And so we'll go through those 3 examples and see how well this update from Bigme stacks up to the standard. Okay, this is going to be a test of ghosting in the note-taking app. And here on the left is the Boox Tab Ultra C, and on the right is the Bigme Inknote Color Plus. The reason why the tablets are kind of at odd angles to each other is just to best capture my ring lighting. So there's no other particular reason for that. It's a little darker over here because this is a little closer to the light, but this gives me the most even light between the two. So hopefully it'll come across the screen fine. Let's take a look at our settings just to make sure that our e-ink settings are where we want them to be. Got a little bit of dark enhancement, that's fine. We're on fast mode. Okay, that's good. And we'll come over here, do something similar. And yep, normal fast mode, auto clean is on, a little bit of dark enhancement, and everything else is 0. No refresh frequency, that's what we want. Okay, and so basically with notes, you don't normally see much ghosting. Sometimes when I originally came into this Notes app from the system menu screen, there was a little bit of shadowing from the menu screen, so I've refreshed from that. But generally you don't see much. So what we're going to do is we're going to erase these little scribbles and see if there's any ghosting as a result of that. So let's go ahead and start with the Boox device. Okay, very clean. Yeah, just went away and I don't see any ghosting. Okay, and then now let's go ahead and go over to the Bigme. We'll click on the eraser, like so. Okay, and it's pretty clean. Now you'll notice that the process was a little different though. I mean, the Boox basically just disappeared, the scribble. In the Bigme, you could see that they made a selection and refreshed that selection as opposed to the entire page. Let's take a second look at that. Did you see that? There was a square, like about that, and it went away. So you can see how it's doing, how this auto clean is working, at least in the context of the Notes app. Better than flashing the entire screen. So you do see a little bit of that graphical process as the items are being erased, but that's pretty good. And I don't think that it's nearly as bad as when the screen refreshes. So this is an improvement, certainly in the note-taking app. Okay, for this demonstration, we're going to look at Google News. And Google News is a nice app to take a look at because we're going to be scrolling, and that can result in a lot of ghosting. So anytime you're doing a lot of scrolling, that results in ghosting, particularly in a background. Now, in the case of Google News, it's more of a white background, but you still see some ghosting. We'll look at the background when we look at comics. But let's go ahead and launch each app. Okay, and let's just check our settings. So fast, a little dark enhancement's fine, excellent. Let's go do that over here. Fast, dark enhancement, auto clean, perfect. Okay, everything's just the way we want it. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of scrolling and see if any ghosting pops up. Okay, that looks really clean. I don't see a lot of ghosting there. It's a little darker, unfortunately. Let's go ahead and let's turn on the front lighting. Like so. Okay, and let's see if we can detect. So you can see some ghosting now in the image there. I'll go ahead and refresh. You can see just right down the center there. If I refresh the screen, oops, it refreshed the entire, oh, I clicked on the wrong. That's soft. Okay. Well, that was one way to do it. Let's keep going up. Generally pretty clean. There might be some ghosting there, but maybe not. It's hard for me to tell. There's a little bit of, so you can see a little bit of ghosting right there. Let's see if I can properly refresh it this time. Yeah, and it went away. Not bad though. Okay. Yeah, I think that's ghosting right there. Let's see if we can refresh it. No, I was wrong. That's part of the image. So that's fine. Okay. Yeah, maybe a little bit of ghosting, but again, sometimes I'm not even sure if it's ghosting. I think, is that ghosting or part of the image? There's like, you can see like a triangle, a shadow there. Let's see. Nope, part of the image. Well, so hard to tell. Okay, let's go ahead and take off this front lighting. Whoops. So, and let's focus on here. We'll do a little bit of scrolling first. Okay, looks pretty good. But again, it's kind of dark, so we'll go ahead and do a little bit more scrolling, then we'll turn on that front lighting to get a better sense of what we're looking at. There we go. Okay. Looks pretty good. I'm having a hard time seeing. Okay, let's take a look at this image. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click the refresh button using the Bluetooth shortcut, and let's see if we can see any changes in that image when I refresh the screen. Here we go. It might have been, but it's really subtle. Let's go ahead and keep going. In the white areas, I would expect to see a little bit of ghosting, like that NPR logo. Let's look at that logo as we scroll up. See, I don't see any ghosting associated with it. Well, both devices look really good. There maybe, okay, you're definite ghosting there. You can see in the gentleman's head, there's a couple white bars. Let me refresh the screen, and we'll see they're gone now. But boy, that's pretty minimal, and we saw minimal ghosting on both devices. They both look really good. Yeah, the images are carrying most of the ghosting. Let's see if there's any in here. We'll refresh the screen. Yeah, there was. So you can see it's cleaner now. But not, so it's there. Ghosting still exists, but it's much more subtle. Let's go back to This one. So we're at full front cold lighting on both devices now. So here you can see some ghosting. There's a little subscribe button, but we can, again, in the image, the white background is hiding. Let's get out of this article. Is hiding the ghosting really well. Okay, you can see some there. Look at the side of his face. I'm gonna see right there. I'm gonna go ahead and refresh the screen. Okay, it's going. Okay, let's keep going. But I don't see hardly any ghosting with the text. I mean, you have to look in both cases. You have to look for it. The images may be a little more obvious. Maybe you don't have to look as hard. But the point being is they're both managing the ghosting really well. So this is boding very well for. We knew that the Tab Ultra C was already really pretty good at ghosting. This is a definite improvement so far, but ghosting is most apparent in black backgrounds, and that's why the images are picking up ghosting, but more so than the white areas. So let's go on to our final test, which is going to be looking at comics where there's going to be more images and more black backgrounds, and that's where ghosting's really going to be apparent. All right, let's take a final look at comics, and in this case, I'm looking at, this is a free comic book day version of Transformers Regeneration 1. Those of you that watch my videos, I use this comic book quite often, and we're looking at it through the Amazon Kindle. So these are both running the Android version of the Kindle app. Let's, as always, take a quick look at our e-ink settings to make sure we've got them where we want them. Fast, a little dark enhancement's fine, beautiful. Go ahead and refresh that screen. And then we'll come over here and we are on normal, auto clean, perfect. A little bit of dark enhancement's fine. And I'm gonna go ahead and refresh that screen. Okay, and we should be going cell by cell. And let's go ahead and do that. All right, this is always a tough one to tell if there's ghosting because there is a background that has kind of a nebula star field. So we'll move on from this page. Oh, perfect. So we are on cell by cell. That's great. Okay. So far, I'm not seeing much of anything. Okay. Let's take a quick look. Looks pretty clean. This one's coming across brighter, that is to say the Boox device, because their front lighting is brighter. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Okay. Just looking around at the images, you know, I wonder if there's a little bit of ghosting here. Let me use my stylus. So there's a little bit of ghosting right in there. I'm not entirely sure. Let's refresh the screen. Maybe. Not so much. Okay, let's go to the next. All right, here we go. So, and we knew this would happen. So now now that we have black bars in each of the comics, we're getting ghosting. There's some obvious ghosting right up in here. You can see some ghosting right there. Same on this one. You can see some ghosting right there. And you see some ghosting back here. The ghosting is similar, like this is similar to that, but it's different for some reason. Not that that matters, but just kind of curious. Okay, definitely getting some ghosting here. You can see I think this is ghosting. I'm going to refresh the screen just to make sure, but you see how there's kind of this light bar and it transitions to darker in that corner. Same thing over here, so I'm not entirely sure it's ghosting. Let's see if that might be the image itself. Yes, it was ghosting. So you can see it's gone. So if I refresh this screen using the Bluetooth, okay, it's gone. But very similar between the two. Okay. I'm getting more ghosting, or check that. The ghosting's more apparent in the black bars on the Boox device, and I'm not the first thing that comes to mind is because the front lighting is brighter. So let me turn the front lighting down a little bit. Okay, I'm going to it's about the same. So, okay, I'm going to refresh both screens. Oops. It's easier to use the Bluetooth. Okay, let's advance this. Let's go advance one more. There we go. Ah, very interesting. So yeah, I've turned down, I think the brightness is more comparable now. The images look the same to me, but it is more apparent in the ghosting on the Boox device than it is. It's there. There's ghosting on the Bigme device, but it seems a little smoother, a little more muted than it does on the Boox. Interesting. Let's keep moving forward. Okay, here both I think have ghosting because I don't believe that this bar here, and you have the same thing over here, but you can see this bar actually comes further down. These are both ghosting elements. So if I refresh the screen, see it goes away. Now you see no bars there. You see some bars here. Let me use the Bluetooth. There we go, and they go away. Similar ghosting, a little bit worse on this one in this case, but very, very similar. Okay. Again, same phenomenon with the black bars, more pronounced here, a little less pronounced there. I'm getting more, look at that. So you can see there's some ghosting right there. There's some weird shading, which doesn't exist over here. I am getting some ghosting in, so look right here, look underneath the text box. I'm gonna go ahead and refresh the screen. Okay, a little bit cleaner. And then over here, if I refresh the screen, see, it gets a lot cleaner. So both, I would say, pretty equal in terms of how each of these are handling ghosting. That's fascinating. If anything, I think the Bigme is a little bit better in terms of how it's doing it on the black strips than the Boox. That's a surprise. Okay, but so far we've done 3 demonstrations and very similar results around the handling of ghosting with the Bigme now that they have their new auto clean feature. All right, well, there you have it. There's a comparison of, or at least a look into how the Bigme Ink Note Plus now handles ghosting under the latest firmware update. And I have to say, it's pretty impressive. I think it goes toe-to-toe against the industry standard, the Boox Tab Ultra C. In actually one case with the comics, actually improved on the performance a little bit as it related to those black bars. But I would argue overall, the 2 devices now are quite comparable. And for Bigme to do that without the technical advantages of having that graphics chip, but working on their software to kind of hone it and calibrate it so that they could eliminate ghosting is pretty impressive. I think I've been maybe somewhat clear, but I'll just say it outright. I don't have any type of investment stake, or I don't know anybody from Bigme. I've never talked with anybody from Bigme, but I do find myself rooting for them as a company. And it's not like that I don't like Boox, because I actually like Boox a lot, and I have a number of their devices and enjoy them a lot. But I do think that there are things that Boox can do better. And I see Bigme as that type of company that can kind of be the rival to Boox, that can push them to be a better company in the end. If you look at Boox's other competitors, they don't really play in the same space, right? So you've got Amazon and Kobo kind of off in their own, fighting their own battles. You've got Remarkable and Supernote taking very focused paths in the marketplace. And so Boox is really carving their own space, and Bigme is trying to compete in that same space. So that's the part of the reason why I am bullish and hopeful that Bigme can become better and can improve and can challenge Boox to be as good as they can be, because they're really not getting that type of challenge for the other competitors. So I do have a little bit of a bias for Bigme. Having said that, I'm not going to review them any more favorably than I would otherwise. It's just something that I personally hope that they can be a player, because I think that we all win if that's the case. And this software update is a great step in the right direction, at least as it relates to that particular issue of ghosting. So kudos to them. It's great to see them improve in that regard, and I hope future updates improve other areas that Bigme needs to work on, like with their note-taking app, and in particular the templates, to a lesser degree with their reading app. A lot of areas where Bigme can work to refine their product. But we've seen, at least in the short period of time that I've had Bigme devices, which is only this year, a number of firmware updates to improve those devices. So I'm pretty excited to see what they're going to do going forward, and hopeful that eventually we'll have kind of a Bigme Boox dichotomy, much like in the auto industry where we have Toyota and Honda and so on, because I think it's good for everybody if that happens. Anyway, but for today, what we know for sure is that Bigme did a great job in their firmware update as it relates to reducing ghosting. So kudos to them. And until next time, have a great day.